that if I need it?
Okay.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll try.
Am I in the frame? Or is it just
Would you like to be in front? Okay, I will make sure you are not.
whatever is fine. I was just curious. Before we
Afterwards.
start, afterwards, it's fine. Okay, do you want to do the email chain for the rest of the meeting?
Yeah.
What's your emails?
Mine is J, just letter J, nation, 1993 @gmail.com. And then what's your email?
It's just AmazonAppStation.com.
Did you want to be on the chain?
Sure. ALITZKY@gmail. Thank you.
All right, is everyone ready? Are you ready, Jim? Are you ready? I'm not wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. We begin our affirmation to resolution with the history of prostitution in America, the equation of black women, prostitute emerges out of enlightenment, followed by a long history of social reforms meant to maintain and sustain anti-black violence. Blair 10. The president of Missouri Press Association described all black women prostitutes, 1899, among those guys, Du Bois includes criminal, shiftless, sports prostitutes, class barrier mentioned, issue sexuality, strategic component, early 20th century, discourse, racial venom, center, politics, respectability, disseminated frank discussion of sexual matters, black prostitution rarely been the subject of examination, source exam, symbolic role prostitution played in the ideological struggle, sexuality that riveted leaders, social reforms frequently on subject black women, beliefs, vulnerability, innocent white women in Girl City have inverted historian from interracial sex zones revealed the importance of race on only prostitute economies, but in urban sexual culture has turned century full of examination of racial in defining economic, social, cultural conflicts. Prostitution can be accomplished only by bringing in full range of black women sex work, and this label as prostitute is nothing new. Throughout slavery, black women are open to violence, forced reproduction, combined distinct form of victim blaming. Hypersexualization of the black woman's body gave antebellum women the ability to blame slaves for seducing the master to create his own impossibility. This meant slave owners could absolve themselves of responsibility of violence, slavery, and turning violence, forced reproduction to an economic relation. Books 81. Slave owners tried to line black women in preparation sexual order who was placed under the rule of prostitute as long as white slave owners paid for services. Submission guidelines in place since women not willingly respond were brutalized. And this form of forced reproduction or racial rape has been overshadowed through a structure of racial capital where black female trauma is only allowed to emerge via the black male frame or spectrum meant for libido consumption. Civil society, James 13. Through black radical feminist women's queer theories, afro-realism, products, theoretical limitation, political practices, conceptualizing freedom, it seems relegated underground resistance with resilience allows continued stage to prefigure the landing slave trade challenge, marine racial capital, racial rate, become peak disease to doors of America 500 years of flight captivity and communal conceptual wilderness created moon fosters natural habitat boundary democracy, the trajectory into freedom, afro-realism recognizes two contemporary phenomena, democracy, boundary, defining freedom through captivity, marine foster boundaries, reimagining freedom through flight, the black matrix allows a project gas, anti-black state, citizenship, terror, moon, the agency pursuing freedom for marine philosophy, survive democracy, violence towards black matrix, productivity, work, labor-based economic exploitation, civil human rights violation become primary, analytic framework, critiquing democracy, rape toward black captivity, reproductivity points to the black matrix as a site of the symbolic material subjugation, birth, marine philosopher, the concept of racial capital over child as the phenomenon of racial rape, anti-black violence, terror also exists, marine complicating enterprise of freedom, racial, gender difference, masculine black suffering, enfolding black female trauma into black male frame, emerging not a spectacle spectrum, death row, massive person, stop the first with the norm center and violence and power, racial rape becomes subsumed under racial capital, the prison system, Jim Crow segregation, mass incarceration, stop the first, cried out the black man, racial rape appears in black women's writings, but maybe only characterized emotional performance, racial rape, complicated miracle, all of blood trails are traceable black man, the force of nature, subjugated, sensory, interior space, colonization, sacrifice, black women, matrices have no public record, it offers deniability, Satan, and bias, or patriarchal, racial, sexual, violence, economics, and private terrorism, marines, black captivity towards female community are viewed defining moments, Western democracy, manufactured black marriage is disposable through libido, linguistic, and material economies, afro-realism, advanced level realism, violent nihilism, denies conventional wars that does not male catastrophes, yet normative warfare, unconventional civilian, primary targets to stabilize and terror, racial rape is an act of war, the DNA of police, guards, master, mistress, races, hardworking immigrants, black captives, maroon, and all inmates can be found in the bodies of black matrix. They lack the wisdom that rebellion inevitably follows tyranny. The black matrix maroon is terrifying because it is violently transcendent. Paramilitary police resurrect the child you have killed. Police, black mothers transform trajectories and breach democracy. And this system can only be rightly described as a war upon black people fought through extreme forms of gratuitous violence. In other words, terror. This is what violence against the black prostitutes tell. The state does not pursue them for crimes they may or may not have committed, but because society relies upon the suppression of black terror. The contagious of blackness is terrifying. The bodies of prostitutes are deemed monstrous and racist because they threaten the system itself. Lives around the bodies engaged prostitutes in this base prostitution and racialized, historical constructed non-normative female body side containing risk opposed to risk of normative constructed a self-clean proper body and race constituted by what is clean and proper and what is dangerous dangerously contagious. The prostitute provokes fascination as dangerously crosses and recrosses the subject-object border. The object designed an unhabitable zone of social life which are populated by those not enjoyed as the subject living under the sign of unhabitability. Thus becomes a space that facilitates a constitution of prostitute, sectarian monsters and cages by whose continuance will rationalize and assure by discourse and translated disposal discourses render hyper-visible bodies invisible. And prostitution has become a zone where blackness of black prostitute infects white purity, the hypersexualization of black women affects subjectivity of non-black women, involved in prostitution becoming already dead and throwing the world's conceptual, material, and psychic orders into incoherence. To civil society owning blackness is monstrous. There can be no dead yet speaking body. The line between terrorists and hostage lords. Blackness has seized the body and threatens the black in the world. The moment the world is no longer terrified by blackness, it is terrorized by blackness. Mode 13. Richness held in the logic and possibility delineates the subject called the real world. To think from the no point outside desire, emerges desire constitutes certain proximity to that of thought. Blackness is ontologically prior to power. So those that brought into existence blackness prior to ontology. Black and bureaucrat subject by insofar as not subject are also non-generic. Blackness is a kind of pathogen bears the potential to end the world. And this relationship between black women and civil society can be characterized by the atomization of the body and separation of human personality from flesh. This represents what Spiller's classic grammar suffer. The cross anti-blackness social political structure in the New World. Spiller's continues in 87. The New World represents a scene of actual mutilation and theft of a body, willful violence, every captive body motive. Well, the captive body becomes a source of irresistible destruction sensibility. At the same time, reduces the thing becoming the captive, more general powerlessness. Before the body, there's the flesh at 0 degree of social conceptualization. The flesh is the primary near zero derivative apartness. The flesh is a concentration of ethnicity. Contemporary critical discourse is neither acknowledged or discourse away. This material seen in unprotected female flesh offers a texture of the living in the dying. And comment the captive body loses any hint suggests the dimension ethics relatedness between human personality and atomic feature. Even if the captive flesh body been liberated, the ruling ethicene remains grounded in origin metaphors, captivity, mutilation, the violent formation of the modern African consciousness, and the one who sees value of the prostitute produces an affirmation negative identity and calls into question the social political order in the New World. Well, 94. Prostitute discourse, counter the heteronic discourse, prostitution, to displace heteronic inscription on prostitute, by the production of new meaning, prostitute rights discourse, transmits the liberal framework, constitute a turn towards the possibility of a new form of right, or rights of difference with function to undermine the judicial political order rather than sustain it. They're calling for an extension of rights other than original subsequent rights discourse constructed to exclude a demand for equality-based distinct difference of being positive, an affirmation, negative identity, and a reevaluation of values. Thus, M&I affirm the legalization of the prostitute. Legalization is a social discourse or practice constraining norms and values within the context of 1AC. Legalization means to publicly legitimize the prostitute. Renford 10. Standard definition of legalization provides a limited picture of legalization restricted to institutionalized features. We only have limited understanding source of obligatory power law, a more constructive approach to further our understanding behavioral effects, legitimacy, discourse, useful to clarify legitimate law. The public legitimacy of law has largely been on addressed by relevance, public debates, legitimate analysis, legitimate law, emergency response, social discourse, modern society, suggests a close link between formal political side lawmaking, the outer world, public debate, discourse, application of everyday judicial practice, norm interpretation, application. They're not confined to formal institutionalized context, and any analysis that doesn't pour for an anti-black violence is an understanding from nowhere. Analysis discourse affects the 1AC only in relation to a larger structural analysis. Alcop 91. Virtue speaking may result in treating narcissistic, yuppie lifestyle, which filled person takes no responsibility for society whatsoever. Undercuts the possibility of political effectively. And absolute prohibition would undermine political effectiveness. There is no neutral place. Even a complete retreat is not neutral since it allows the continued dominance of current discourse, acts of mission, reinforce dominance, the attempt to avoid problematic speaking for is based on the illusion, the individualist ideology of the one, the desire to find a method to move from criticism, the desire of personal mastery, to establish privilege, discourse, and practice, to remote listening to, essentialized offers, and non-ideological constructed subject prefer the desire seeking to an intellectually blast or a new historical narrative out of concrete analysis of particular power relation discourse effects involved. We need to analyze probable actual effect of the words, discourse, and material content. One must where the speech goes there, and it's not always that the case that the end works off the source of claim destructive practice cannot be sufficient to refute it. We must ask will enable the empowerment of oppressed peoples, and some would look to slavery as a thing of the past, with the middle passage of chattel slavery for the genocidal logic that orders the liberal multicultural narrative, state-based reforms that allow for the continuation of violence against the black body. Rodriguez 11. Reforming slavery, anti-slave violence permanently inscribes slavery to post-emancipation USA craft. The state remains the slave state that erects apparatus to reproduce state's capacity to create prison chattels, politically and legitimize enslavement. The social relations of power, dominance, and violence that constitute ontology of racial meaning itself. The white civil subject is made legible through racial genocide. We examine the logics of genocide that dynamically structure racial colonial conquest, indigenous culture, extermination, and racial chattel slavery, centering conception of racial genocide as dynamic, set the social logics allow the slavery to prison continue to be more clearly marked. This is where we can also narrate contemporary racial criminalization, policing, incarcerating apparatus are historically tethered together in a genocidal logic of the slave state. The structural bottom line of black imprisonment is over the last 4 decades of contemporary manifestation and genocidal racial substructures that have been reformed but not fundamentally displaced. Like defense multiculturalists are attention to be principally ultimately, on the bottom line, of likeness to the present genocidal logic, reforms have never alleviated nor fundamentally alleviated the social emergencies contended produced by historical logics of racial genocide. Racial genocide flourished through these reforms measures, as such logics are readapted to protocols and discourses by these newly diversified racist and white supremacist apparatuses. There you go. Last one.
What does it mean to legalize the prostitute?
So the first thing that I'll have to define is the legalization. Our Renford piece evidence talks about how legalization is a social discoursive practice.
That's fine. What does the prostitute mean?
So the argument in the constitute, okay. So in the 1AC, when we talk about the prostitute, we talk about how all black women have been deemed as being prostitutes because their blackness.
Sure, they've been deemed being prostitutes. Why do you use the phrase the
The
prostitute?
prostitute is a structural location, a structural position occupied by both black women and people who engage in prostitution.
Okay, I want to talk about the Alcoff piece of evidence. The whole Alcoff article is the problem of speaking for others. Now, yes, you've cut a portion of it,
We
but
cut the conclusion.
underline certain points. I'm wondering why you get to talk about black women in the context of prostitution.
Because it's a structural analysis. The reason that Alcock will conclude affirmative in this debate is it's net better to have white people talking about this problem, or I remain complacent in problems of anti-blackness.
White people should be able to say that anti-blackness is
Where does
bad,
Alcoff
otherwise we
say
all
that?
just
That's on the
have
very
issues.
bottom when she's like, it's not always the case that these end worse off, and that's how the article finishes.
Yeah, why is it
That's the
talking about
conclusion
the
of the
context?
article.
Sure, I understand that's
That's
the
the
conclusion of the
argument.
article. I'm wondering why, in the context of your act, it is a good thing for two white people
Because, like
to
we
talk
said, it's a
about.
structural
Okay, fine.
analysis.
I think especially in the context of our app, it's important for white people to understand. Our app makes an argument about the way that people who are not black can be blackened because of their proximity to black politics, to black
Okay,
sexuality.
I want to talk
etc.
about the James piece of evidence. It says that there's other issues that are racial issues that are happening, like the prison system. I'm wondering what the app does to resolve that.
Well, like our argument is that the prison system is just a symptom of the structure.
So by affirming
I
the
think-
prostitute, you resolve the prison industrial system.
Our James evidence makes an argument about how status quo discourse about the prison industrial complex and kind of ideas of the abolition of prisons is bad because it focuses on a type of public sphere violence which never acknowledges sexual violence that happens to black females. It's a public-private argument.
I just don't know
that
where
prison
your
industrial
evidence makes the
complex is
connection
bad.
that voting affirmative would be able to resolve.
I think
things
that
like the prison
Rodriguez evidence
industrial
is
complex.
indicative of the idea that if we can undermine logics of anti-blackness, we can undermine things like the logic of the prison.
Okay, about that. So what does voting affirmative do?
Like our argument is that voting affirmative is an endorsement of our scholarship or an endorsement of the structural analysis of the one.
Why is voting affirmative necessary for that? You have provided that
Because-
no, I yes, hold on.
Wait.
You have provided that information about why legal or why
I think the
There's
app is
no-
more than
I have not
information.
even asked the question. You provided arguments about why there's been violence against black prostitutes in the status quo.
Yes.
Yes. Why is that a reason to vote
We
affirmative?
have a specific methodology which
What?
indicates that prostitution is good because it is deviant to civil society. We are an affirmation of prostitution as good. You have to vote app to affirm prostitution is good. Vote negative if you say other things like affirming prostitution is not good. Affirming deviancy is not good.
There you go.
Very often the case.
Yes.
Is that right, Charlie? I'm gonna check.
Yeah.
Everybody ready?
Not yet, sorry.
I didn't get it. Did you put me on
No.
the That's part of it. Whatever.
Sorry.
It's fine. Just as long.
Okay, there's a room. Comparison, something like.
Okay.
Sweet.
Framework interpretation violation of the action defending desirability of topical government action resolved proves the frameworks of the policy words pressings for resolve is not also enforced where next steps are like United States, the government of Washington D.C., West Section 85 United States means the federal government of Washington, Senator in Washington D.C. Legalization means to eliminate prohibitions and implement regulations. Boston 7 legalization where prostitution provide governance of legal mission conditions and conditions of legalization to prostitution conditions specified with saving licensing registration health checks the prohibition law of all laws key differences with the line of their regulation with saying nearly is 90% national accuracy 12 nearly all 9% should be a policy Article 3. Each topic being scaled to do the idea should adopt the agencies of virtue of sex means policy and action to government means the entire base of something else occur voting each of the app doesn't mean the best interpretation of the topic they fail to justify the resolution to go negative best way preserve competitive equity conservative forces always exist only policy discussions and persuade them to change curriculum date. Their presence changes those versus there is not a concept between the aspects they always act in that case with always awareness with just for much clear reading and versus the hard change. If you know how to play, I will plan for addressing our promises for doing a first stage practice or general social change on or sitting on the new components and the second change should be central switch side debate plan focuses key to switch side and supports the active plan half the time. This is good. It's key to education in your create the knowledge predictive debates just talk to the rules and these obviously the knowledge schools are there broad enough forces to address a variety of values stage space debaters are part of the most many issues development flexibility implementing and refining of issues is essential for the debate. Limited topic of discussion is key to decision making. Advocacy skills is target discussion separate freely. In debate, conference debate, conference effect decision clear identification for speakers not the left focus on question line mirrored insights or broad discussion of the solution. Yeah, it was a decision making more place than decision being made. Best partners with their class talking about homes as sports crime. We like a discussion on side part place arguments too broad. Discussion of policy questions is key to skill development. Plus students as agents decision making as we're going to take in 12 different signals about lessons understanding more skills management build product more interest in direction improving real close makers interested in some defend using those questions questions, challenge or sometimes learners found other methods for format for improving communication system and speed of understanding role-playing pursuits, take facts, market style, competitive debates and dialogue, G2D and strategy scheme, from space for both sides, going 7 basic access, marketing, favor, for student therapy, episode 7 topic, second episode says negative, cross push, cross honor, top level, citation, more chilly, competitive suffers, this every corresponding condition, for the island, take form, for quality, access, for some topic, food, next search one for one side, because the table name is represented dog, opposition is circuit sharp side, to be constant access to the world, for framework that maintains quality, state conversation, remains some substitute, short action, not group, stop boxing, effective deliberation is key to solve. Skip there. Counter advocacy. Misty and I affirm legalizing people who work in prostitution. Advocating the legalization of the prostitute is an edification of the bodies of prostitutes, a form of objectifying relationship, which turns the act number 3. Objectifying attitude, the edification with which the body of a human being constantly turns objectifying. They cannot be objectified or labeled, which I can only relate to in this fleeting spontaneity, have the capacity to affirm someone as a sign, not as an object, but as another subject. Advocacy. Prostitution is commodification of body through the market system, Eric's Navy. Harlem is regarded as the absolute class side business party falls in the marriage determined class purpose position for the bargaining with bodies close really bargaining working prostitution really sphere with violent ways that the very control when they are which represents delivering not any prostitution and or being most agreed miserable over class versus national society. They want to be able to spread the prostitution category or prostitution fight capital society treating capital as equivalent to other forms of oppression to restore classes to fight for social change. They can reach across all lines of identity. This will reduce oppression to recognizes classes the roots of social relations menace and one understanding become mantra developing all practice this results in the developing themselves experience knowledge given our experience shape and more production. Experience and decision with an conscious capital sport, force listen the British experience in itself as unique off the same time unique and social parties or forces through Marxist theory, the incorporation class are resistance, consequences, classes, no consumer fundamental class culture, there can have a constitution of form of oppression, so the class relations are both subject expectations and a cyber potentially as agents social change for the room class women and belonging for race, these questions and so forth. Intersection of not resistance, revolutionary resistance dominate class students are power through choosing identity that they impute the work to argue that class forms not to reduce every generational person class to not the underlying part of the group. What happens is class racial antagonism historically rooted in class divisions outside or tenderly the class percentage during the prison people plus the longer slash person needs to reconcile checks everyone so remains small such structures I was dominated during the was meant through saving and transfer and just find bad fear for lot of restaurant searchers for labor here sorting work hands because they were short responding so in fear for volunteer creation and saving back into Africans were saying abandoned and just some paper slaves control less like the formal lines for us white some allowed to police various periods of labor not because conscious slaves of foreign so the interesting and basically free capital undergirds all oppression. This project of mastery, mystery, something will be other rights, the oppression outlined by the ones he with for 19 Africa has used the sheets of nations, credit cops, project dominating, human nature's technical fish, mental reason, and justice, world technology control. We have this global business confiscation, deforestation, industrialization, and dying oceans, disappearing ocean layers, this anywhere immune systems all around ways that's why the existing many are including social class disease, research across the planet, vote negative, to endorse a structural historical analysis of the material conditions underlying anti-blackness, historical materialism is the antagonist of capital focus on production is key to transform objective totality by recognizing profit and surplus labor and generating class cost revolution. Deposit 14. Materials and Germany, fund commercial sort of materials, the anti-slavery, cultural history, like creating transportation, slavery, history, and the social the style of nature, social relations, coming conflict with production materials, and weapons, historical structure, and property, lesbian, take parts, competence, transform relations of production, the word social inequalities, attack against materials, war against socialism, understanding totality, the basis prior to the app, any method outside of labor theory humanizes capital to be known. One theory will have to often understand social parts of software, balance prices, social society, based on what recognizes terms, access, healthcare, education, has a administration, systematic part, economics, marriage, race, business, sexuality, disability, nationality, singular countries, permanent capitalism, singular contradictions, self capitalism, without discrimination, thus accepting capital only or commercial rights that recognize the history of state labor and its currency, social as the source of wealth, management theories we found in Marxist labor theory of the value case. The 1AC has essentialized what it means to be a prostitute by focusing solely on female sex work that's flawed, narrow, focusing excludes male sex work, Minicello, and 14 history of prostitution extended to deep past American historical death and refer unfortunately about female prostitution, common all carries behind you can see the way in which very definitions term last time getting never be used by both and purposes political to my process come to attention of the sexual many of the line word female sexuality, the idea a new idea of homosexuality, therefore my biography, that previously to be malleable and the category the inherent permanent sexual fulfillment for themselves. They allow crossing team holiday to be the market of the establishment of homosexuality, the medical provision sometimes when don't use links and engage in those discussions. Fair to analyze queer prostitution allows political systems of anti-queerness to manifest violent political antagonisms. Lots of queer sex work in cello. In 14 prostitution was clearly associated with another kind of central controversy trying to get levels Protestant men little commented on. Or there's something important if you ever Hoover held one sexuality, banned antiquity, him as homosexuality, sexual abuse of children, and engagement in called such as cited actual instances to be safe for here for cases in which these prostitution elements means for some to make additional testing inspectors conditionality emphasizes the black attention more typically received by children of unrespectable there. Skip that card. Yep. Rituals of speaking come from positions of privilege that reinscribe certain power relations and shape the effects of their speech at all costs. And then to the ritual speaking possibility of any position, location, or context, or the content can alert turn the ability to give instance of being relatively rich will be a necessity for the institution. We cannot make a neutral voice. We may at least all think that the Jews speak some voice, maybe just other simultaneously. Political epistemics suggest that the Jew lose some portion of control of the meaning and truth of evidence, partial loss of control, scientifically lost accountability, and order to speak about the discourse practices can account for some of the effects of these practices. If resistance within debate becomes sutured by settlement colonialism within the academy, which only perpetuates erasure and conquest of knowledge, we should refuse to give meaning to the app in the academy. Talking in 14 Romans of settlement makes a short shut the first to attract relation between white settlement disappeared indigenous people system, trying to the base of the formation white descent and flavorish bodies in the land offense characteristics permanent settle, large construction knowledge of justification for acquisition box sources role in the right to conquer spendingly, the right to know I know therefore I conquer therefore I am refuse our tenth place sometimes conversation also making by marking what is off limits is not for progressive discretion what is sacred cannot be known. To speak of limits in such a way makes liberal thinkers uncomfortable. The academy recreates anti-blackness by citing violence as the reference to black being plus in 14 we take up racial violence and academic analyses and histories and grouping native violence and black death bar and shows blackness is death violence citation blackness culture repetition death violence similar and the seems no way out and this on rights and commits of humans invited and become human terms to require intellect sentiment one of the logics making use supposed to naturally support violence is wrong but why is naming it naturally the heart of our academic conclusion to draw attention to black issues provide deliberate commentary on the ways blackness works and see violence that defines it and to demand this deliberate commentary central how we think about the planet discourse isn't over-determinative critique must be joined with politics. Brian 12, the material of people are kind of taking notes and second life and ways they what if it's not available or they can afford what if there are other applications sometimes issues on one of ideology they are simply issues of power things we treat the things the extremes will miss out on opportunities for engagement that can't get the opposite that you want to change what's actually doing critical theories like the principles focus after question mark revolution or never question or what the was come between plugging the or profit that suggests looking into some things sometimes the graphic gestures to find ways wave our cables words flowing how get people rise up their suffering from color. We need less critiquing, more carpentry. Only legal action leads to effective overarching change. McCormick 10, critical approach to reject possibility of reaching objective. Patriotic because they reject differentiating facts, values, so we see highly conflicted certainty about the power of more position players, like there's normal day after normalizing good their estimations, some political action lead to change their there's must therefore differentiating facts and values. We now differentiate between acts and current prosecuting the large line between we like anything else and critical theories of government theories like market actions believing just one based on just international and global quality just through their own words. Market word.
Ready for gossip?
Yeah.
All right. So why is education about regulations from the USFG so important when you read a Tuck-and-Yang piece of evidence?
First is that it's predictable. The Tuck-and-Yang argument would be a refusal of the academy writ large, but the
So it's good? Okay. All right.
So the argument would be.
Okay, next.
I mean, I was going to explain why it's not double turn, but if you just want to pick up.
No, I want to ask it. This one's a better one. How does how does your counter-advocacy interact with the Tuck-and-Yang?
The counter-advocacy is a better method than the app.
But how does it?
Obviously, if we win our Tuck-and-Yang argument, then we reject the app because we're rejecting the academy writ large. Our argument on the rest of the pages is that if you win, the Academy is a good space to talk about things like anti-blackness. We have other methods.
Why do you get to have why do you get to be on both sides of this debate?
Or you're not on both sides.
Yes,
We're
not
not
one
saying
say you say
Academy
you say Academy bad, but here, we're gonna be with you on these other.
The distinction is none of the other pages say Academy good, but like if the F can win that the Academy is good, then that leads to other discussions of the method of the one.
Okay,
It would also be all the framework arguments.
Yeah.
They indicate that you have provided an argument into a debate space, and we are testing that on multiple levels. We are debating.
We also think
Okay.
the unpredictability of the F makes it difficult to
All right,
strategy, which
so
some of the sort of things.
What's it, edification?
The Cooper evidence talks about it as creating an I-it relationship where we can sort of objectify what the other is into a single unit that we can then have a relationship.
So am I a black woman?
No.
That's the problem. That's what that evidence says. When you objectify the prostitute as something else, then that distances your relationship from it. It makes it so you cannot
So,
resolve the impacts that
okay.
we've talked about.
Okay, hold the phone.
Okay.
So the 1AC was a structural analysis about how certain identities are connected together.
Of course.
What is your link?
Our argument is your advocacy statement.
How?
When you-
The counter advocacy can agree with the sort of structural analysis and reject
Oh,
calling something
We agree with the
prostitute.
entirety of the 1AC, besides you saying
The
the
prostitute.
prostitute.
We think that's the problem.
What's wrong with saying he prostitute?
The Cooper evidence says that's what creates an objectified other that we can then have a manipulative relationship to.
What
so
is an objectified other?
It's a manageable subject. It now becomes a thing that we
So the
can
one
have
he
our
attempts
sort
to
of
manage
manipulative-
so the one he attempts to manage the prostitute.
You create the possibility of management.
okay, I wanna hear you riddle me this. How don't you yourself create another by saying we legalize people who work in prostitution? Because it seems to me
Because there's not a single unit that works in prostitution. There's a complexity of people who work within prostitution. We're not
But-
reduced that
okay,
to one unit
all right,
of analysis.
all right, real talk. If we are able to win that there's something in common with everyone who engages in prostitution, and we
Still not offense against the counterclaim.
Why? Why? Because it's
That's just
magic.
defense. The counterclaim will recognize, obviously, there are things in common that does not create a single static subject of what the prostitute is.
So let's you good?
Look here. Case, cap, counter advocacy. Things still stand. So you're good to hand them evidence.
Yeah, so it's case.
Case, cap, counter advocacy.
Yeah.
Alright, is everyone good? Sweet.
Prostitution of a racialized zone, the hypersexualization of black women's bodies means they are always ready to prostitute in civil society. Boston Park City are overcoded by these sexual stereotypes. That is to say, prostitutes do not lose their purity simply by engaging in sex work. They are racialized and black, and this viral modeling determination means that members of civil society can no longer differentiate between blacks in the world. Our affirmation of black prostitutes is embraced by terroristic figure to civil society. The threat of the monster's body did is being Christ in order to meet civil society comes held hostage. The world is no longer terrified of blackness, terrorized by blackness, free potential for opponents to produce welfare and child services, violence, hypersexuality, extortion, black person during 20 hours, never stating Christian, Joshua Fathers, and world criminals on the unfreedom of black bodies. They say we only focus on female sex work. Our argument is that sex work has been marked by the label of black female bodies. They hear a piece of James Evans indicates that we understand black female bodies in the status quo as prostitutes to civil society who are always able to pump out babies for civil society, which means, of course, the 1AC talks about the female prostitution, but also the 1AC does not necessarily say that all people engaged in prostitution are women. We say that people engaged in prostitution are black, and which means we do not specifically say that it is only women or only men or only queers, which means none of these arguments linked to us are James Evans also linked to queerness argument. It says that the violence before reproduction happens, and the violence that happens against queer people is because they do not reproduce the way that society wants us to, which means we have an alternative explanation. This next piece of alcohol evidence is not about the affirmative. We are not taking for others or making identity politics argument. We are doing a structural analysis of the way that we should resist anti-black violence. The specific reason we are speaking for others or advocacy statement is for Jesse and I, and the way that we are implementing a structure of anti-black violence. We say that we should accept the prostitute as deviant so that we can tear down civil society. This alcohol evidence. They've also considered in CX that if white people do not talk about anti-black debate, would just turn into a hegemony on hegemony debate, which is probably a worse form of debate. They say the Academy critique our pillars 7 indicates we cannot
not ever truly comprehend blackness or understand it, which means that our burden cannot be commodified, but also the Academy is a purported contradiction with all their other advocacies and a reason why Marxism would not matter within a debate around which is probably the reason that their whiteness, their ability to be fluid and have it all political spaces is whiteness for excellence, they say. Also, the risk of the act of something good probably means that the Academy does not matter. Their piece of Hudson evidence, about how we only focus on death. When he says that we should have a focus on life amid death, the way that life happens in the corners of social death and the absence in spaces like prostitution. They say our discourse has to be accompanied by political engagement or advocacy. Texas is an example of political engagement. The one you see an engagement with the idea that politics and the status quo is bad and we should overthrow current political norms. They say only legal action solves changes the law whenever private recourse within current political schema. This legislative regulation during this automatically changing the law. Do you protect like prostitution still means regulated bodies for things like STD testing and stop and first that's our outrageous evidence. Say do not give over 10% of the protest through civil society does everything it can to avoid helping black people. They do not have a single piece of evidence to indicate that structural changes will happen. Slavery, Jim Crow, is the Christian industrial complex go to the capitalist routine permutation to both extend our James Evans the one see interesting on the category of slave space replacing capital for all problem actually tackle which can only be resolved by structural change custody. Second is the alternative by strange races seeking to driven capitalist structural expectation accumulation by bodies is bullshit in 5. Yes, the next location of other to martial discourse and I just really call the possibility that black bodies are refined the capital for Martha will call me slave for a million will call me the elements of slavery accumulation to our black bodies I think things becoming using category especially like categories rather than about that is not going to solve what's very much later on to on calculation rather corporate estimation on major contribution of based in the working language making sure rationality what could capital not because you merchant rationality in the middle of the what's really this is more than you for you social liberty some of the recovery of things easy he likes to notify but social research of luxury workers registration and disaster accumulation down but we will crash low so big until it's struggling domination good and kill things in the side after chronic states and fill side children time this regard stage reverse the indication proliferation of civil size spontaneous accumulated death and this is the alternative extension the best alternative for commercial capital to overshadow black babies to regrace and black oxygen and black babies for the foundation to the side by giving birth to black children private surveillance then how the market such a child services and forced reproduction is always ignored in favor of focus on public surveillance like wages. This means the alternative cannot resolve anti-black violence because they start from the wrong place and against the gaps of the active capital movement through racism and sexism is law grade 11. I would imagine for black issue for leadership but it would be much in the part of the white minister coming around. I was never really pushed on by me when I said constituent group with so action there's no more reason to people are in partial not by me here problem but these behaviors should get structural support for people that supposedly showing before I can work with the serious things and feels even more pressed by people that have to be self-determined self-defined by people not articulate or oppression and class first just another way of telling people shut up about race crossing 2K. Others are determined most fundamentally true and not our dealing studies rather than try to balance the wars and come on apply how to class to become justice and find a way to another way telling everybody else shut up left walk which really are feeling the vibe to really function function make them very class means you'll do your white middle class making self control claim self political violence by screaming that this is you'll get to hear from that from the same claiming class being on identity or state model for natural identity for way to the group is natural qualities not special to history classical as what you unique or moves how they can be really should they feel the violence of essential qualities of need just by identifying their prostitution qualification argument is non-unique extend the argument that I've already made above about how blackness cannot be commodified to the status quo and even if it is it's non-unique because the commodification already happened we're not for identity politics we are structural politics anti-blackness affects everyone it's not a question of one singular group white people get pilled through anti-blackness yes but black people are on the bad end of the stick or what should answer or what should have this thing to all their alternative or all of their alternative arguments and permutation color results all of the alternative counter permutation to both there's a uniqueness question here. Our argument is that civil society has objectified all of prostitutes into one structural label which says they are bad and disease and contagious. We embrace that to destroy civil society. We are internally turned your argument because one is not to manage prostitution, but rather we say that prostitute is deviant and for the potential to destroy civil society, which means you're an internally turned to this argument. We are an internally turned to this argument. The link evidence this argument is also absolute shit, probably. The permutation results in prostitute is a structural position, which means their critique can never understand the one and the entire one. See all of our structural analysis and that benefit to the permutation picks are also the ideal the white is par excellence that are disembodied or that's our disembodied politics argument I'm going to make on the framework so they do not get to steal the entirety of the one AC just because we said one word that their link evidence is not even indicative is a bad thing. Right. Counter-interpretation for tactics of the resolution and on the topic of the exact same space structure for police rules on the stuff of curse for by producing academic competition to issue races not related or important 12. A same very much respect of civil understanding by state exchange for state space one who will look racially tactics for one to chief pedagogy and then another people on the same views of political violation racial monster structure discourse regarding cultural private team and response to it no is it space logical rational white people to about various racial arguments returning to digital violence on here like conflicts racial source to feel like college or you college domination or all someone never say people might be watching for every single investigation and is it healthy origin making race and interest against healthy race on the first session, all like the very first show, those are the rate. The number of last rock, working on the skin, reach out by purposes already. But it's our man to control my parties, we would be good about so much from people and manufacturing to define or possibly classifying a political project and forcing people to replace their oppressors with violent interpretation, disembodied us from our politics and leads us calling in the USFG without ever realizing that we are implicated by the political left. Our teams don't have an plain text focus over deterrence to be undermined discussion in the moment. We see USFG regulations and debate terms of the state paper politics just so whichever worse than negative to engage our actual politics is the answer. When you talk over from the academic legalization, interpretation, want to see legalized prostitution, collective discussion, prostitution not be suited for illustrating views that these entirely civil society that's what we're that or right for that in a second. Counter interpretation legalized make legalistic how relates to Article 11. Legalized make legal sanction over make legalistic or practice it particularly making sure you need to stand down legalization for ensure to be a credible study of the task force powers. Legalization for public interaction more critical role discussion with most evidence controversial than word for public political reflection that's a rent word evidence crosswise. Our disembodiment argument from the top of the here sees ground one cases the position issues legal matter. Church repeats the prostitution of like each revolutionary finish should be used the prostitute body should be complex things because that's any of that deed. Is it will interpret six people interpret what side of relation about prostitution because they didn't talk or should be able to recognize this affirm to be. Is it that we're the prostitution have the single person who is over black constitutionalists revolutionary to black and understanding black and civil society to regulate and control their policy arguments are answered by all of our disembodied arguments that we do not have our hands and levers of power, but we do the best we can to legalize prostitution within a social discourse space have our answer to USFG and regulations arguments. They say we have to be nearly all agree we are nearly all prostitution. We would agree that for prostitution argument that you should oppose the action. I've already answered the but they say only policy can make people change. If people won't listen to anything besides policy, then we probably don't want them moving against anti-blackness anyways. They say which type of bullshit concept made up by debaters. They just defend the government on the app and find the government on the negative when policy means everything considering counterplans and defend the government change switch out. It's not only constitutional select groups made every change when they have a possibility to get her out. They say limits are key to advocacy. If we would have to count top political, you can vote after reasonability. They have no unique reason why we're from the associated for the topical. And also produce which arguments false to free counterplans on the negative treatment of geometry. We need to understand why civil society perpetuates violence against prostitutes. They say the Steinberg and Freely Evans and just the input Steinberg and Freely Evans. We need to learn how to buy a car, which I think we can also learn from K debate. Policy debates are critical to buying a car. Also, the one you see is the states the one you see advocacy steps is the states supporter of the rational one you see. They say key to decision making. I think critical debate teaches us the same discussion making skills that policy debate teaches. They say it's key to dialogue. I think that our advocacy is a shape point for office frameworks to not have been internally to clash with the university could have read a methodology. You would vote after other shape good arguments to be a counterplay to the average proves they have literally chosen not to engage us.
What does it mean that whiteness is the position of fluidity?
The ability to do things like say the academy is messed up and then the kind of critiques that operate within the academy is the only like the ability of whiteness.
I'm wondering the whiteness equals fluidity relation.
Yeah, our argument is that only like people who have access to privilege are able to make contradictory political statements and then still win debate rounds.
Okay, I want to ask about this piece of Wilderson evidence. It's about Bromsky, and what's that?
Sure.
So
Your alternative is historical materialism, which I think is very, very Marxist. I also do not think that I have to win your alternative as Marx to win that. All of your theories of wage labor can never incorporate the slave. That's what that piece of evidence.
Okay, so about incorporation of wage labor. So the Walker evidence about Occupy Wall Street, which again, why is that?
I think the Walker evidence is a contextualization to the permutation argument I had made. Our Walker evidence indicates that when in anti-capitalist discussions we do not include discussions of sexism or racism, it results in the violence of Occupy Wall Street, where there's rampant racism and sexism.
And this evidence says that Occupy Wall Street completely ignored issues.
well, you can see it.
gender
You
rights.
can see it in movements that are based off economic relations. Like in Russia, it's like just get back in the kitchen, the revolution's over.
I mean, I guess my question is, why is any of this like a dissent to the alternative?
I think it's
when
just such
Occupy
the
Wall
alternative
Street
because
was,
your
like,
lack
no.
of inclusion of race or gender means that your alternative is violent, probably racist, probably sexist.
Why
Occupy
do we
Wall
not
Street is just an
include a
example
discussion
what
of race when we've read cards about the way class and
If
race
you
are related?
include a okay, well, I think our Wilderson evidence makes a distinction that race is a structure and not just a sub-product of capitalism. I also think that if you can include discussions of race in the permutation, probably results in residual links.
Okay, so you have to win the Wilderson evidence. What's the sort of no uniqueness for predictability argument?
Uh,
On
I-
framework?
I think the argument that you're asking about is like the part on the bottom where she's like this is the most predictable literature base because if you read anything about the prostitutions on the topic, that's what they're talking about.
They're talking about,
all the literature
George
about
James
kind of
and-
prostitution legalization is written from the way we discuss prostitution and the way that we kind of understand prostitution in social locations. I do not think most of the literature is written from a top-down governmental perspective because there are most
How
of
do
the
we-
conversations going
I
on.
guess
about
how
we
can we
understand
determine what the literature, like, how do we quantify what's a literature-based.
I mean, I think there's a reasonability argument to be made that the 1AC is about discourse surrounding prostitution. If we could find the pieces of the 1AC pretty easily, then I think that like there's an argument to be made that you could find a 1AC that also is about discourse.
So if you can find the articles, we should be able to find the articles, is your reason to.
I mean,
Our
it's not-
argument is just that large discussions are going on about prostitution discourse. If you've done any topic research, you would have found them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott, correct, 7:55. So the top part of the document is actually gonna be a block, but I didn't actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's just fine.
It's gonna be the counter advocacy case and framework, or framework and case, sorry. Counter advocacy, framework, case. And there's a little bit of an overview on what?
I got
I
it.
had 8:08 or
Uh,
7:58.
See, that's, yeah, 7:55.
7:55.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 7:55.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
that's fine. Good job, Tyler.
Keep us on our toes.
We good? Extend provocation to vote test the competition, now they say it's a rightness, no, that's naturally, there's no reason why we cannot test the affirmative as to why it would be a better way to be able to resolve for rightness than you are rightness too. This is going to answer those arguments. You can sit in this debate, right, and talk about the violence in civil society and then leave and never have to experience it, which means you are the whiteness and the disembodiment that you talk about, which means that there is no unique office there for them to go to framework. The resolution exists to ensure there's a balance around that has a sense that there are arguments on both sides and debate to be had with that they had a better position or political side points that offers for them it's the LinkedIn that the ethics to change the topic of tactical engagement and cost advocacy to avoid the possibility of that the external impact. Majority of our arguments of political judgment and advocacy of decision making is the primacy purpose of debate, and I tell you the affirmative has a very good offense around argument to we are individual policymakers who in everyday choices affect our surrounding environments. We have an obligation to those people the argument can take this were not inclusive to demonstrate the characteristics of box the individual station making such the way the rush operators as a short range ships and Haiti they use that decision with the organization individual and the president here such the data has examined defines the subject the president feeling the impact of the using the making decision there was no satisfactory way the momentous and complex issues have been decided we are concerned decisions are forward such as the substance the capital can be by now next is the by they say that they are in the direction of the topic no you are not all our interpretations prove that our legalized interpretation is way better than any of yours indicates that legalization of prostitution is regulations and removing of restrictions, especially in the context of prostitution, because it's all it either has regulations or it's decriminalization and decriminalization, which means either way you are not doing, which means either way you are not tackable. Now they say rules are bad, forcing attack about that is bad, but law is essentially key for women whose voices are marginalized and seem less credible now. Rosario in 89 even laws and flexible the empathetic Corinthians judges were to rebalance toward the legislating the cross-sexual conflict solution is placing the action to control the judicial discretion of the government and the cross-sexual obedience to the motor of the tribe of human voice the right to without any people's judgment they do the territory principle legalities most principle for having sexually decision makers and the most vulnerable and focused on for individual privilege or individual manifestation that gender finds obscure structural sources of oppression. The app has no means by which they translate their theory into politics experience in temporary pressures have the view structure they were the patriarchy such as the structure view such as the way the individual the definition of person such as they were the individual needs the sense of the behavior sex they were the conforming state of patriarchy when looking at which is the ideal of much less needed process in privilege and privilege capacity for the spiritual third world is unclear. We are responsible all humans are humans at the same time the individual patriarchy but the privilege pressures the marxist the chat the individual notion and the accountability that's a collective responsibility market I mark that card responsibility now they say that the laws bad that role playing this embodies us with sexual exploitation of black women is facilitated by legal doctrines that foster racial and gender bias engaging in the details of legal reforms key to solve Alexandria in non-gender Jim Crow and sexual righteousness like fantastic for one of Columbus and very sacred for the other one has in solidarity is and people try to fact why women say the hearing credibility such as black women are less likely to believe in course into racial history in legal crisis polarized groups of the people history must say scrutinize our jurisprudence to make the strict modification women are eradicated to cover such the departments have to say carry out these goals until the eradication of gender rights for rape laws is an express legislature judicial bodies women will suffer and advise implementation of rape laws the article exposed to rape causes such that when the victimization of prostitutes the task is determined reform and which one is we be able to worse now classifying the requirement cards from the case so we can only access majority of their impact as the app it's not transformative politics because they work down kind of institutions that produce exclusion of purchase. McCormick argues that can't interview people policies can and identity should be used to trump the argument we need to engage institutions for participation in democratic life which solve decencies democracy. Now they say counter-interpretation legalization is to make publicly legitimate. That was answered about by our interpretation legalization is only regulation. That's the only predictable thing that we can the predictable thing that the negative can counter offense off because the regulations is where we garner a lot of things is why prostitution or legalization would be a bad thing to make it publicly accessible. There's not a dissent to that. There's no link to politics or no trafficking dissent, which means it kills all our families. Say crime and legalization shall lead to regulations. No, that is not true. This evidence is not. It's not the concept of prostitution and only ours is, which means it's reason to people prefer they say switch out is bad. Except in New York, from the one to see switch out debate doesn't force divorce or any New York lines that what is so unique to the basics we can have decisions that are contrary to our beliefs and systems that have to take a real world concrete steps. They say we are disembodying and cross-fighting and asking about that they are also that too, which is the reason why it's not A and why that's not true. They say that and that's not true. Yes, we did try to engage. Yes, we are indeed. Yes, we are indeed. There's a reason. The framework is engagement. It is an engagement of the engagement at the top of the Africa, the United States to legalize prostitution. The Alexandria evidence from above is a net benefit to that. The reason why it solves the entirety of the app better than it does because it's the only way to be able to do that. They say there's a lip base only. There is no way that it's a predictable lip base already to be able to do that. They say policy arguments are disembodiment. No, we would not just talk about hegemony. There's reasons why we would have to talk about impact framing and racism, which is a reason why we would still get those things now. Send the credible evidence. This is you making questions that conservative forces are always going to exist. They just say that should be informed of their policies. Yes, but they're always going to destroy your policies, which means that the app's not going to be able to solve. Now they say there reason we talk about competing interpretations of referral subject to standard feedback mission and definitional comparisons, key topic education, reasonability is arbitrary, and the crux of their arguments is the reason why they're not reasonable and reason the credible evidence is an independent impact. The reason why you must engage in the reason why you must engage in the institutions. I'm not going to go for fairness and limits. It's a question of method, whether policy is better than what they talked about. It's not disappointing. because there's no way to solve. They say it's not the reason why civil society's bad. No, but it's the reason why we would be able to. It's the reason why we'd be able to resolve civil society. Now go to the case file. Now go to the case file. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Essentialize queers, epistemological, methodological underpinnings are terminally flawed and range in terms of your standing point that defaults as well as understanding that prostitution is something that only affects women in signification accepts them as undeniably correct, which means you ignore the violence attacks about that. They say they're root cause, but you don't ever talk about it in the one you see the violence that happens to queer bodies every day, which is exactly what our evidence is talking about. There are contest such communication allows for systems for domination to perpetuate rigid lens of accessibility that forces everyone within its confines, which also imposing on authorizing modes of ultra violence on those that are on OZEF altering now speaking for others. No, your all-cop evidence is awful. There on the unundermined conclusion it says in conclusion, I would trust that the practice of speaking for others is often born a desire for mastery to privilege one itself as one more correctly understands the truth in another situation champion, which means you link to this argument. Their speech outcomes are a position of privilege. Not only epistemology impacts our presentation, but discursively dangerous and should be rejected. They are all evidence indicates that their position of privilege co-ops their impact answers all their arguments that the research they participate allows them to know their position they're in. When we speak from others and from a place of privilege, it reinscribes a certain power relation that the one you see criticizes and have negative effects on their speeches. This is the argument that they link to all their whiteness claims and disembodiment claims because they can talk about racial violence. We never have to experience, and our evidence is specific to talk about racial issues for a form of privilege. I'll confident too loud. The government speaking brothers were according to the precious and really colonial administration speaking brothers who are going to be completely legitimate. The changes speaking across the difference rate, race, cultural, sexuality, and power are becoming increasing clear in all where one speaks from an AI speaking national meaning. True, to one says certain privilege location discursing dangers from down groups to speak to the option street itself. Authentic process the conflict women, legitimacy, credibility, the demands subjected speakers does not nothing to disrupt their hierarchies that operate in the public. Now, no, I'm not going to go for the chatting anger. This is not a double turn apart, performing a contradiction with their framework. An argument says that when you talk about things like racial issues in the context of discourse, but within the academy, it's able to be co-opted, which means no, yes, you do link to it, but I'm not going to go for it. I can see the impact defense. They say that if they say the impact defense, no, it does not take out the Marxism, and no, it does not take out the Marxism criticism. None of the offense would be able to take out the alternatives to why that bad. No, they say that her front is whiteness. I kind of did that above. You are also whiteness too, which means that you cannot determine what whiteness is or what whiteness is or half acceptance. And no, that's not true. All the arguments are framework or reasons why it's necessary to be able to test the out for multiple issues. Now, no, your discourse is not to be able to resolve except right evidence. This has two impacts. First is the anthropogenic. It ignores the way non-human objects speak through material interactions, influence politics, restricting practically subject expression, and its counterproductive causes obsession with theoretical purity, which blockades flow over to praxis, which is a reason why the alternative and the counter or capital have to solve the entirety of the case.
What is speaking for others?
Our alcohol evidence indicates that when you speak from a position of privilege about other people's violence,
Okay, what's the alternative to that?
to reject the act.
Reject the act.
Yes.
How do we talk about things like anti-blackness?
Also
Sure.
describes it as listening.
Alcoff describes when there's instances where yes, you should listen to different types of violence,
Okay.
but indicates that when you speak
Okay.
from the
Nobody in this debate round is black. How are we supposed to
Yeah,
talk
and
about
our
things like
alcohol evidence, our
anti-blackness?
alcohol
Who are we
evidence,
supposed to listen to?
our
at
alcohol
round
evidence
table?
indicates that when you talk from the position of the prostitute or the violence that's happening with one,
How
not
does the
recognizing,
one you see-
I'm not done answering your question, with one, not recognizing your privilege from two white people to be able to say that things are whiteness or say
How does
disembodiment.
the 1AC speak from the position of the prostitute?
In contexts of things like the 2AC, when you make arguments like this in disembodiment, this is whiteness, you don't recognize that you do that too.
I cannot say that it is disembodiment to read two arguments that are totally contradictory.
I think you cannot.
Yes, I
One,
benefit
they're not
from a system.
contradictory, and two, I don't
Do you think I should just like spend the 1AC talking about
I
how I
don't think-
benefit from white privilege?
No.
That seems like disgusting.
But you should recognize it.
I think the 1AC does that. I don't
That's
understand
not
how
true
it
at all.
doesn't. All right. I guess you have an argument on the framework flow about how we need to privilege a focus on structure. This evidence is about
On
how we have to
institutions.
challenge our individual stakes and like the way that structural oppression happens.
I don't know
How
which
is
piece
this
of evidence you're talking about.
It's the second piece of evidence you read.
The Mazzaro evidence is indicative of law in the context of women.
Okay, maybe it's the third piece of evidence.
The Alexandria evidence is in the context of Black women being facilitated by prostitution. All of the evidence I read in the truancies in the context of the AF.
Okay, sure, it's about the way that legal reforms affect with
No,
color.
It's about how
Why-
engaging the
Okay.
details of legal reform is
I guess
necessary.
let's talk about those two pieces of law evidence. Those pieces of law evidence indicated that the way structural racism operates is by maintaining itself through the law and changing depending on what the laws are. Why does
No,
endorsing the
that's
law
not-
the only way to solve it instead of
Later in
rejecting
both of
pieces
those pieces
law?
of evidence, it has warrants as to why yes, that those are reasons why the law is bad, but it's necessary to engage it. Also, I think the
Why is the law critical to engage?
our critical evidence makes a uniqueness claim that these violent forces you talk about will always exist and co-opt your movements, which means we need to deconstruct them
Sure,
from the
I don't
inside.
think that's a
So
reason.
it's like
we
keep your
can't
friend
fight
close
them.
and your enemies closer.
So we have to assimilate into
No,
those
you
structures
there's
and
no
then attack
assimilation.
them.
Legalization of prostitution would not be assimilation. It would be a rejection to these conservative forces in their own.
So letting them
playing field.
regulate prostitutes would be a rejection of forces.
Yes. Right now,
That's
multiple
ridiculous.
conservative forces have came out and
Okay,
said that
fine.
prostitution should not be legalized. Legalizing that would resolve the violence that those people have put around the bodies to traffic them.
Marxism.
I'm gonna take a second. Okay, 5 seconds, please.
That's 7:50.
So it's just gonna be the capitalism criticism?
I haven't read.
Not yet. Sorry.
Right?
At the top, I'm going to extend our entire width for evidence. This is our impact argument, civil magnitude calculation, the conceded eco-devastation argument, desertification, deforestation, destruction of the oceans, etc. All of those are an extinction impact, which is the reason that it always the case, because the only way you can generate sort of movements against things like anti-blackness is if you are alive. There are billions affected every day by labor exploitation, food price spikes, resource shortages, energy shortages. All of these are our impact arguments, which proves that they have to win the permutation to win the debate because they conceded our impact arguments, which outweigh the app now. All of that means that they have to win the permutation. The permutation, they can't get it. It's a question of opportunity cost. What did they give up by reading? What is it? This is a good view of debate because it generates important decision calculus. Competing precision. Point of the alternative is universalized theory, which means any risk of a link overwhelms. Solving this question of competing views of history, not competing methods of action, which starts to be the weapons labor theory of value is the best conceptualization of human development. It's to me that only understanding the totalizing structure of oppression allows us to generate adequate revolutionary practice. However, although their arguments about wage labor not being sufficient are not relevant because it's not just wages. That's why we read the piece of Alexander evidence that says, yes, there are forms of unpaid labor like slavery that are also bad, but those are all parts of the structure of capital. Now capital is the root of all systems of evaluation and permutation. Falls back into a formalism which turns the abstract and permutation was R16. The current year of capital off the neutral-based self-evaluation, the only proves with practice of Marxism working radically, research top down total social institutions, the whole that are being oppressed by and repressed and alienated by conditions of commodity society, social institution of social control, funds, and detail part of their background articulation, Marx, precisely, emancipation, and action, the power of violence, determination, geometry, one more control structure, less control structure, destroying the mechanism, corrected zero, the establishment of institutionally through radical emancipation politics with power capital, perms co-opted, part of the team, we're not for you, we're Thomas Weir, conservative historical circumstances, agents, participating firms, legitimacy of those structures, looking to realize the Thomas conscious decisions that organs, different reference to which we think in act dreams, and the rights of the narrative condition, inherent style, cream rupture, and the continuity of the constitution, say the same because this narrative produces violent amnesia, system, new ritual, consistency, condition of violence, embedded capitals of Ross, everyone wants the future optimism, field, new system of destruction, we need to which now focusing on free market, situation, the world, the free market is love to negotiate the future, love to negotiate the future for us now. The link arguments are also all going to take up the permutation. First, I'm going to extend the institution of prostitution argument. They I'm going to extend the prostitution argument. Their only response to the blackness is not modified. Extend our Erickson Evans prostitution. Roses the dialect of underside to capitalist marriage systems. This is the conceded sort of historical analysis that our Erickson Evans maintained. It also functions as the commodification of bodies. I also think they say blackness is not commodified. Slavery would disagree with you. Starting with Alexander and the capitalist ideal is to make everything property. To see certain bodies and treat them as if there's something that can be consumed, which is the ideal of prostitution. Which means even if they say that the affirmative is some sort of subversive act because it affirms the sort of demons of prostitution, it still links now historical material analysis of prostitution was prior to the Aspen 97 frequency, section American and American became institutional forces, very forms of developed to open prostitution side by side with the development of monarchic marriage, group modification, section for and full prostitution, both products, class, second, progressive equality, property, weight, table, peers, and it is necessary for the prostitution, monarchic prostitution, and some full concentration, both the same, to society, you could not imagine the degree to sexual commodification, return to national and graphical industry, every attempt to embrace the free market of sex is an act of rape, endorsement of misogyny, proves their embrace of deviance is still bad. Level 14, sexual is not taken account what goes beyond far beyond opposing issues of high risk of assault and murder, the sale of sex commodity, in general objectification, women, white sites, sex is only not related, operation marine forces, nothing should be commodity, no one can be, something can be bought, so we don't real sexual free department, no property forces sell, sell their bodies. Now, the many steps extending that here, the system permutation reduces class to another structural system alongside race. This class is over with the only class-based politics can create a universal totalizing theory because they conceded labor is the only side of exploitation where that sort of goes across all lines of identity, which means this turns their app as structural critique arguments that they are making, turns their app as structural critique arguments they're making now. Skip the cat stuff. Now they read the piece of Wilderson evidence about the alternative leading to white supremacy. I think they're about how we're not just focused on wage-based labor, even then this critique is wrong. Capital controls gratuitous violence too. It's not just wage labor, but unpaid labor. See slavery. Chen 13 Wilderson presents critique Gramsci analysis by there's by alternative framework in play. Not only on wage forms labor management population, which have become an relation capitalist population because but nothing nonetheless trafficking capital because there's defined by general commodity economy, which is not recognized as labor management population, which said be organized determined by capitalization. That means wage relations put parties on law for the status of chattel offers another move down traditional production for their husband. The law of labor tradition legal analysis status of chattel is reference case of black business labor to rationalize rape and sexual exploitation by women of course racial division of productive and reproductive labor consistently maintained from factors in gender categories and gender hierarchies and racial categories. That evidence also talks about the intersections of race and gender within the sort of class-based politics of the alternative, which means that they does not gloss over their arguments about the black matrix. They say the alternative is racial capital because we gloss over the back and black matrix. Not true because the 1AC said the structural critique is good. We're just a different form of structural critique, disproving them. Historical materialism is the antagonist of capital extent. Fazio, the alternative self capital by filling with production as the destruction forces historical development. Now it doesn't link the talking Yang stuff because our argument on the capitalism plays that we would agree that academy has been sort of structured by capitalist forces. It's a question of what it's a question of how do we sort of resolve those things. There's a reason it's not a double third material capital. Historically, the root causes Alexander arguing this is going to take out the cards they read on the sort of two cards they read about ignoring race and gender. We're not ignoring it. We're analyzing the way that race divisions are rooted in chattel slavery. Where elites attempted to save up people and the revolution by driving a wedge between poor whites and slaves by feeding a narrative of racial superiority. The reason Europeans went to Africa for slaves was also historical material. I did.
Okay.
Plantation owners feared natives fighting back and disruption of immigration if they use the short supply of European immigrants. All this means the alternative is the only way to generate a universal theory for emancipation. It all solves the app. Peterson 14 error over 400 just 500 of general modern police penalty and systems commercial crushing racial security continues. Police violence can be tackled with our non-neighbors. Economic justice on systems can cause discrimination by captains or child slavery becoming indispensable to the undivided role. Arsenal of the capitalism can be drawn away from the revolution while structural racism and capitalism leads to racist ideology. Ideology.
Just after there.
I'm good. Is it alright if I use your, how much time do you have left?
7:58.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna write that down.
When we agree.
Yours is going to be case pick, right? Case pick, framework cap. Oh, did I ask this? Sorry, I think this.
Yeah.
All right, I was like, I'm not sure if I asked. That would have been really rude.
No worries.
Thank you, Emma. And there's not going to be any cards. There will be a little overview in case. I'm sorry I'm taking all this time on this game, guys. Is everyone good? All right. Prostitute subjectivity is overcoded to proximity to black women. Hypersexualization means there are always already a prostitute civil society. This kind of viral blackness turns black people into monsters by contaminating skill subjectivity of a member of civil society. This creates a crisis mean where we no longer differentiate between blackness and the world, putting the world hostage or terrorizing the order of civil society itself. This creates the potential for our politics which resist child terrorist violence, hypersexualization, racial, ever expanding, industrial, low complex, and world premise on the on freedom of anti-blackness. Their first argument is this queerness argument. We said people engage in prostitution. It's a black and dumb, i.e. how the James Evans talks about forced reproduction, about how black women are forced to create kids to become slaves, and gay people are demonized because they do not have children, and it's also the possible standard. You could always say we don't mention something that's considered a prostitute, i.e. like animals. Now, on to the alcohol heads. We're not speaking for others. You have no link. They read all these cards, but they need to tell you what we specifically do, where we specifically talk for black people. Where we are structural analysis and political praxis aesthetic. Political withdrawal speaking destroys the hope of political effectiveness and silence aesthetic. There's no such thing neutral science withdrawal from speaking and violence status discourse object. This exact makes it like violence, seem violent and violence natural. And all their queerness arguments also like to speaking for others, which is just a double term. And we say it's not better for us to begin talking about these things. They say talking and we say blackness cannot be quantified, it's not understood. But anyway, well, LOL. And then there is literally Adam Jackson who debated anti-blackness in debate and redeployed what he learned out there to stop a prison from a prison being built. We are the only people that can identify our action and our scholarship to actually affecting change. Go to pick. Like set across nation solution to the picture. We say that the one seed is setting us up against the civil society through the embracement of criminality, i.e. people like the PRL exclude us because of what our app is talking about. But furthermore, we say that what they do needs to be individually punished because they steal stuff and get rid of it when it's convenient for them, i.e. the way that they did that they kicked out of our one seed, the way that they kick out of Tucking Yang, when they decide that they're going to kick out of capitalism or framework, they get to pick what they want. We say that's a violent logic of disposability. Go to T. Premise of legality through the lens. Yeah, have to defend regulations and not legalization. They extend our counter-interpretation. Legalization means to get rid of legal sanctions against prostitution. We have several. This has their interpretation. One, forcing people to pretend their oppressors and sign hostile stuff should regulate black women as violent. That's the Leonardo program, and this means they should attempt to re-understand the talking way, not inherently violent. AKA our interpretation. We give enough ground for our interpretation to be reasonable. Trafficking, prison abolition, counterplay, or Afro-optimism, critiques discourse method like historical Tito's anti-blackness arguments say we shouldn't embrace things like criminality, but furthermore, regulation, particularly violence of black women, which is the only distinction why we're not topical left, because we do not defend that. Random health inspections such as HIV testing target black women, which proves their interpretation topical limits, way regulation black women, wounds that this shit also is not up to us. It's an incredibly bad idea for non-black people to debate about ways civil society regulate black women's life. This is impact $100 portable skills argument. If they teach us how to regulate black women, that's what the negative interpretation debate does, and why they're discriminating skills are simply bad. But also the reformism arguments, the ones that they go for, is why they say that their framework solves slavery issue, because the prison industrial complex slavery may have ended by the name that's not and didn't function. The law manipulate, interpret, strategic order, maintain anti-blackness, massive structural, 9 times even their inability to create discussion sexually unproductive. This also is on the topical version. The answer is the topical version. Yeah, and furthermore, changing the law does not change criminality. Your evidence does not speak to that, and most of your evidence isn't even about the black subject position. In your Alexander evidence isn't isn't even that good. But furthermore, plain text focus, disadvantaged state undermines education and leaves the negative debating the state of politics without ever questioning politics behind the 1AC. The battle should call question the interpretation of topic regulation. Why focus on debate within civil society without the fundamental logic of the anti-blackness? And we saw the ground right line arguments. The defense constitution good name that you can have a dialogue. You chose not to engage with us. And every single reason we win that regulations bad things are have to defend our implicit answers to the topical version of the app that they give, and also decision making. We say using their structure just replicates the bad parts of debate. On switch side isn't even true. That you can defend the government on the net. You can get the education that you're looking for in other routes, or you can read your USFG arguments against us. Good guy. Look, history is not a link to the criticism, but furthermore, I think you're going to vote on the permutation. Do both are because your Chan evidence understands Wilkerson wrong. It's about the libidinal desire, not the Gramsci desire, not about Gramsci. You did not say libidinal. You do not explain anti-blackness because ideas mastery already integrated into our psyches. The need to dominate black people literally comes from sexual terror, gratuitous violence, such as choosing libidinal consumption of black flesh, and the media are understanding through an economic analysis cannot do anything. This means revolution expands into black violence and leads to sexual racial violence and North Mexican racial violence. That's our walking into evidence. But furthermore, you didn't read the impact card that you literally extended and we're going for. But furthermore, Wilkerson says that the black body is positioned against work and civil society means we saw the internal link to that argument anyway. But also social death outweighs occupied subject, location of the capitals. One must first be able to understand transaction hegemony extent or Wilkerson that black people know that transaction back versus human direct relations force post alternative black people all over produce violence groups strategically exterminating according to structural difference. And best the alternatives for racial capital overshadows the black interest in recreates the type like today. It said our hooks and James Evans relation capital trade off that happens in the private sphere, so we never care about it. But furthermore, I'm going to concede your reformism this as their explicit double turn what you're talking about framework because of how reforms are really bad because we are not the reformist team that you're looking for. You're the only one who links this argument and all of your links in the petition class, all the companies and categories supersede any way for people to be able to engage in the actual institution because people will now want to get on board with the revolution when they do not think it is for them and will now work on that. And also competing views of history cannot resolve the proximate causes of violence that we are isolating. They need to win the impacts of the links outweigh all our social death arguments, which they have not done, conceding they don't even have an impact. And I think it's very disingenuous, all of the explicit double turns that they have in the 1 and C.
750? No, I took 5 seconds of credit.
Oh,
No.
that's 50. That's all good, yeah. Other things.
Yeah.
You're all good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's gonna be framework, the counter adequacy, case smarts. We good?
Should we shut the door?
Oh, yeah.
I'll continue interpretation that you were taught now when you know framework is not a reason, not a reason, reject the team, no articulation of what errors, my reading was a value, it was about to decide the whiteness arguments within, conceded to play a question that they link to a tune, that they link to, there's no answer in the one are the fact that they are the ultimate form of whiteness because they can say these things about the violence and then leave this room. If you go to the start, you have to look me in the eye and tell me how they are no whiteness, who they not recognize in him, any of the things that they see that's to which is the reason why this is even the 2 6 and essence, we just have to defend that this state is good, which would be a good thing. We did that, which was the 2 which is the reason why changing out of this would not be a form of right, if conceded conditionality is a good thing, the necessary to test the opportunity to cost of the affirmative, which is the reason why that we would do, which is the reason why we could now go to the counterpoint. No picks is not a reason to reject this. Conditionality also is the reason why such all the whiteness are around the whiteness arguments are still right here. No, we did not steal the entirety of the act. We questioned whether using the constitute was a good path. Now that's probably best for racial education, original education, because we didn't learn about why these different forms are good or bad. The one yards not impact anything, impact any of this or other sense, which means that the only impact is whiteness. That link to that value, link to that which is the reason why I just now go to case. Now I'm not going for any of these arguments with the political political practice is out, and speaking for others is a disad that they cannot resolve, even resolve its reason why the alternative is good and to evidence in the case that we are the only ones that can solve for political practice. Maybe that be more than criticism. Now they say things in the top like the prison industrial complex. You can't solve for that. Only the alternative can. Only the alternative can. Only economic means can explain why the prison industrial complex came in the first place, which is the reason why the F resolves the entirety of the case A and case now the perfect argument. You do not extend the technique to the alternative to the alternative. The reason why we take out the F even then Georgia to break it out, explaining as to why technique would be the drag, being the direction of the F, being the direction of the I injection. I not does not matter if you're part of the political economy because the alternative resolves that too. Now go to the key framing argument for the one another. The biggest sound. The one is he definitely read the dire with where the impact evidence even if we don't win that the outsolves the root cause of structural racism. It's irrelevant because we can see that distinction is said to the equal devastation things like overuse of resources, waste happening, negotiations, which is treating them as well as a global finance impact. Wanting our social death arguments do not assume a world in which biology is suspended, which means to generate deviant revolution is impossible. They have no answer to the root cause question. Wanting our aside from some assertions that the alternative cause of violence they conceded are Alexander evidence and the one in our Peterson evidence. Race divisions did not exist before chattel slavery. The elites attempted to save people revolution by driving a wedge between the whites and say yes, by being a narrative of racial inferiority, which led to social death impacts that you're talking about, which means that there was no net benefit to the permutation we resolve. So the entire case now the permutation, there's a shadow extended, the shadow extended, the one AR don't answer anything, do not allow the 2AR to stand up and extend any arguments. If you do not have it in your 1AR, then you cannot evaluate it because I do not have a 3AR answer. That makes me coming negative and powerful. First they conceded they do not get a permutation, which I think makes this pretty evil, pretty even. It's about what the opportunity cost, what forms of history did they excuse by reading the 1C. That's a good view to me because it generates important stitching calculus between competing equations. Any risk of the link takes out the permutation they draw between no analysis, understanding histories prior to any specific path of resistance. Now, no, they don't understand history. They're only one specific point of prostitution, while we understand the underlying conditions of capitalism. Since we're winning root cause, there's zero chance they win a lynch. They've also dropped the par evidence for sense the all gets co-opted. This is contextualized by the one in our example, slavery is the way blackness keeps commodifying the world. They say that commodification cannot happen. No, that's not true. Slavery proves that yes, capitalism can lead to commodification of different bodies. Now, the Erickson evidence, which indicates that the historical nature of prostitution was arrived alongside monogamy. Prostitution was deemed deviant because it was unproductive form of sex, compromised to sex with marriage, which contributed economic and society. Also says that legalizing prostitution furthers the view of the body that is a commodity traded about, which is a further whether it evidence that creates the mind to the one see refining objectification body, which is the reason why they cannot resolve any link arguments because they put prostitution at the forefront, but it conceded that link argument, which means that the alternative solves, which means that the alternative solves, which means that the alternative solves the entirety of the case. Now they're both an argument. So when you're dispersed some of the stuff like the economy, not rubber root cause arguments, there are reasons that the all solves the integral psychology. That's also new, which means that they do not get our 10 explicitly responsible. What the article says is saying that in section Marxism because we don't view exploitation as solely wage-based. Alexander's contextual example of slavery and uncut labor still leading to exploitation of black racial. Now they say racial capital. They just say we glossed over the private sphere. Not sure. Erickson, Smith, and other evidence all see that rape in the private sphere is justified by the idea that women are a commodity that can be controlled and that can be controlling the third person and controlling the first place. They say there is a trade-off and that no one would join the revolution. No, Artemino evidence is very good and their arguments are not coordinated and are not talking about our rival revolution. Historical materialism is antagonistic capital. Sandy Fazio, the alternative sells capital by revealing modes of production by structuring forces of historical development generates conscious with the loud proletariat revolution leads to taking back system production, which is the only way to alienate capital and transition and classes society. Yes, even if they win their history, they are not material in any way, which means that the alternative is the only way to resolve the entire case. The author prior question to a specific passive attack theory is a prerequisite because it's a private that provides an ethical and epistemological underpinnings to the one is logical justification. They have to prove that their argument is historically responsible to demonstrate its validity. The current historical approach provides the foundation for the acid packs action without history fails to suggest that as social antagonism. So even if you're buying any of their whiteness arguments, the alternative resolves all of it because it deconstructs racism through historical materialism, which means even if there's a risk whiteness was perpetuated, there's probably a risk that they did it too, which means that the alternative is the only way to actually be able to resolve it because we are able to understand the capitalism ideas and under these things that they say there is a reformism dissent. No, you do not solve reformism. We are the only ones to do that. Class supersedes everything. Class supersedes everything. We saw the entirety of the case to the root cause. There was zero risk of an affirmative ballot when they can see that. The permutation is not solved.
Yeah. We have like 7:58.
58.
And then Wesley. I'm sorry.
It'll be case and then the K. good? Sweet. Prostitution from a racialized with the hypersexualization of black women's bodies, where responsive proximity, black women are always already prostitute, which means that members of civil society who engage in sex work have a very particular relationship to blackness. Subjectivity becomes overcoded by viral blackness. Purity is not undermined by sexual purity, it's undermined by blackness. This means that members of civil society can no longer differentiate between blackness and the world or affirmation of black prostitutes who embrace material spirit of civil society. This brings the monster's body dead, yet speaking of the crisis of order, meaning civil society becomes held hostage because blackness can consume and destroy its members, of which no longer terrified of blackness, terrorized by blackness. Anti-blackness creates the potential for equality to display hypersexuality, extra killing of black person every 28 hours, welfare, and child services violence, never expanding Christian just republics and world criminals of the unfreedom of blackness. Extend our silencing dissent on the speaking from this argument. The alternative to discussions about structural violence is that white people don't all just talk about hegemony every round, which should probably network. So honesty allows us to understand our personal complicity in relationship to anti-black violence or add the statement here that Jesse and I should legalize the prostitute, which means that we are personally implicated in the one I see and acknowledge that we are part of a successful civil society that pushes prostitutes to the margins of society. Our arguments that we should accept those priorities of our arguments that we as members of civil society should accept the prostitutes only risk the one I see deconstruct privilege in a positive way. They have also seen that all their queerness arguments mean they also link this argument away, which means probably not offense for them. I am not going to go to the framework for all this is an implicit answer to all the embodiment arguments they've made on the framework. They have made on the framework for their political practice that is not explained, but we do have a practice to implicate ourselves in how we understand anti-blackness. I've done that work about they say we can't solve the prison industrial complex. Our argument is yeah we can, because if we criminalize everybody, if everybody becomes black and they have to lock up everybody, which they can't do, which means that we overthrow the prison industrial complex. Also the permutation on cap probably resolves to go to the capitalism flow now, frame the capital through the lens of the permutation. They need to win the individual impacts of link debate outweigh all of our dissents to the alternative alone. Sexual terror and social death push alternative massively outweigh and small risk of link. The two and does not impact the individual links beyond saying that maybe the fractures coalitions, which is not enough work because they do not explain how the specifically fractures coalitions with the struggle against capitalism. There is almost zero risk that the permutation hurts alternative solvency, but we are winning 100% risk that sexual violence is still very prevalent after the exclusion of the affirmative extend or permutation do both with the James Evans. So the one I see that Berkeley's the lowest in 5 Evans from the 2 we see we have 3. So essentially the alternative only the permutation can resolve A is the libidinal economy. Ideas of mastery have already been ingrained in our psyches and need to dominate black people through horrible sexual terror, gratuitous violence, and shootings, or the libidinal consumption of black flesh in the media could not be understood or resolved by the alternative because it assumes that these sole reason violence happens against black people is capitalism. Our walk around is contextualized this the impact very well. Rampant racism means that there is no black leadership in the movement. Women are molested and sexual violence is rampant. White supremacy figures are present. White people attempt to speak for black people, which only leads to more violence. We cannot ignore that anti-blackness has been ingrained in us for than a matter of money. Violence doesn't happen to black people because they don't have money. The alternative for instance, approximately cause of racialized violence leads to our impacts. B is social justice. The external offense, the subject location of the worker who enters into a transaction of value or hegemony is not accessible to black people. This is demonstrated by our walk around as a movement without an understanding of anti-blackness. White people subsume black demands because they have no ontological resistance to violence. That's our bullshit evidence. Post the alternative, black people are still open to gratuitous violence. The groups can strategically be blackened and exterminated according to a structure of anti-blackness. C is that FF the alternative of corporational capital, which overshadows black nations to recreate anti-black violence or gender because forced reproduction of black nations by the foundation or civil society center hook sevens relation of capital to trade and value, which is doing slavery to justify the rape of black women, which means the alternative only creates a roots of equality. They scream inclusiveness while black women are labeled more stigmatized and subject to sexual terror despite being in the economic system. Linked debate their depiction of classes and all encompassing categories supersedes identity strategically. Ignores that anti-blackness is also a structure of hegemonic relations that affects everybody as long as we win the after not identity politics. So they view the act as something that's only for black people, is only strategic move by bias to redirect attention onto them and place white men at the center of importance to the movement. This turns all their coalition arguments because their walk around indicates they shove everyone who's not a white male out of the movement and have no way to resolve or not wage violence against black people, which dooms alternative solvency and links to all of our dissent. Their only argument to answer this in the 2 and R is that the reason that we enact sexual terror against black people bodies is because we see them as an object. I want to ask you, in a world of socialism, what changes the way we see things as objects? We do not see things as objects because they're subject to wage relations, but rather because of the structural relationships of violence that operate outside of capitalism. They say extinction dissent. The affirmative solves the extinction dissent. The extinction dissent because we in civil society. That was our solvency. Also, the permutation probably resolves this. They say the root cause should be grouped. The entirety of the root cause should be. They've conceded a 1A argument about how root cause is infinitely regressive and never resolves approximate cause, and it never resolves approximate cause. So finally, could cross-play all their framework arguments here about how we need to directly combat structures of violence. Talking about history does not provide us with a method to reconcile the current, the actual politics of the way that violence goes down, which means they are unproductive politics, and there's zero alternative solvency or the permutation is important. All arguments on history are also links of omission, which means they are resolved by the permutation. They see the permutation permutation is short, the permutation and the 1AR is at the very top, and the entire 1AR is contextualized to the permutation, which means you should probably evaluate it. They say commodification is inevitable. Now, when you see that, is the libidinal violence argument. People do not rape black women because of wages. New system of economics does not make black women any less of an object. This commodification argument is also not clearly explained. We're not a traditional idea of prostitution, which means this argument probably does not link to us prostitution. They say prostitution are deviant because they have unproductive sex. The 1AC still sees prostitution as unproductive sex, which means there's not a link to critique. They say that privacy violence is about commodity control and socialist economies. People still get raped, which means that it's not a question of commodity control, but rather libidinal desires. If you think there's probably still sexual violence in socialist economies, there's probably a reason why people get raped for reasons other than money. They say that the alternative solves capital by revealing things. I think you have room because that permutation probably resolve those things better, but also, are you kidding me? They do not lead to a mass movement until the 2 and R, and even if they are a mass movement, then the 1AC is also a mass movement, which means we resolve all of the impacts of the critique. They say we have to have a historical response to this argument, so we have that all your history arguments are linked to omission, which means the app resolves in the neutral code apple, and it says do the alternative. They say based on the root cause of racism, no, all of the one thing the 1AR did well was extend the 1AR and all the net negatives to the permutation. They do not solve the root cause of anything because I've extended several disads about why they do not get access to the proximate cause of anti-black violence via historical analysis. I don't care what started slavery, I care what can undo anti-blackness, which is not capitalism.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah,
we try.
Really, are going for it.
Can I see the Walker evidence that you're extending in the QAR?
Yep.
I'll try to look for it.
And the James evidence?
I'll get the James stuff.
This is Walker.
Thank you. Not your stuff is in the document.
Yeah.
If you want like a updated one without the extra stuff,
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure I didn't mark it.
Oh, no, well, there's some evidence that you read in the 2 days. Actually, James.
What's up?
Is that over the IC?
Mm-hmm.
Do you read this highlighted part here?
Yeah.
Okay. the Erickson evidence in? Is that?
It's the one in CW.
It's the one in C? Okay. Thank you. This is one of those debates where I kind of wish we could have like 2 more speeches, because when there isn't, like when you collapse all of these negative positions after the block, I think it means that there's like a thinner level of the debate. And that ends up making me both read a bunch of evidence and have to try to like figure out how to weigh offense in the debate, which I think ultimately ends up hurting the negative more than the affirmative. So I vote affirmative in this debate. I'll go through the kind of process of that, and then I'm happy to answer particular questions. So I think that I don't think that you have a good answer to the James evidence, and the ACT is being like really consistent across the debate about the uniqueness of hypersexualization of Black women as rapeable subjects, and that the potential of sort of checking back civil society, and the evidence is just like really particular to the way that these bodies are commodified and have been historically. And so even if I'm just evaluating the affirmative versus the alternative, I think the James evidence does the permutation. It is the permutation. And I look to your disads that you look to the offense that you extend in the 2NR. You're right that the Dyer-Whitford card was in the 1NC, and you're right that the 1NR, Jordan, right? Yeah. Jordan extends it in the middle of the debate. I don't really know why that's a unique reason, how the app uniquely makes that worse. And even if I'm willing to give you some of your link arguments, it still is about commodification, which is the Erickson stuff, that labor should be primary, which is the Tamino stuff, and even the specificity of Blackness gets commodified, or Alexander, right? This is the root cause of racial classification. I don't think that that's an answer to the James evidence, and I don't feel like it's an answer to the way that their structural analysis reveals how this is happening right now in the context of contemporary civil society. So that means that even if I give you some of that, I don't know what the unique impact is, and how we uniquely get, and it's not just a question of sequencing, how do we, or process, how do we get to extinction? I guess I don't know why that outweighs the potential risk of checking back anti-Blackness as it exists today. That coupled with some of their alternative offense, like the Walker evidence, that sort of reproduces sexism and racism. I don't really know how the alternative checks for some of that. I'm sympathetic to the argument that the movement doesn't coalesce to the 2NR. I don't think that's a reason to reject the alternative, but I do think it means that the 2AR gets to make a little bit more nuanced arguments about how your coalitions will be problematic if you can't overcome some of the things that are going on, and that you don't solve for the root of anti-Blackness. Even if you win, and I don't really think that there's a very good root debate that I can evaluate here that helps either side, I am sympathetic though to the argument that you don't solve for the root of anti-Blackness, and that there's a risk that the permutation of the affirmative solves for some for the way that the Black matrix is always already constructed by or in the context of capital. So I guess really what I'm voting on is the uniqueness of hypersexualization as the uniqueness of solving for hypersexualization and using that as leverage against the genericness of your link arguments, and not really thinking that the alternative, or having a good enough explanation of how the alternative is different than the app, or produces some sort of unique impact. Yeah.
My question is, I feel like a lot of what you just said was not clear in my problem.
So that's why a lot of the reason I spend time reading the evidence, because I think that you're right that there's just kind of some tagline extension, but I do think that, what is your name again? I'm sorry.
Jesse.
Jesse, he extends the Hooks evidence, he extends the Walker evidence, he extends that this is about the sort of libidinal construction of terror and the sort of raping of Black women. Is that what you mean? Or
yeah, but I guess my problem is that sure, he might be extending the name of the cards, but it's not explaining it, so I don't know how the 2NR I'm supposed to answer those warrants.
I think that when I have direct text you don't solve for the libidinal, the role of the libidinal in this particular instance and hypersexualization, and I don't have an answer to that. I mean, if that's the extent of what he's explaining,
Okay,
I don't have.
Yeah,
an
and then my
answer.
next question is you talk about later in your RFP about how you don't feel like we've solved the root cause today.
Mhm.
I guess I just don't agree with that.
Sure.
I feel like we're the only ones doing root cause explanation, like specific historical examples with the Alexander evidence
So
that
I
was
think,
never answered in the debate.
yeah, and I read the Alexander evidence. I've read this before. I read it like 2 or 3 times again because you claim that it's what the root cause of racial classification is. I just think that the James evidence is better on this question in the context of prostitution and the way that and forgive me if I'm mischaracterizing your app, but the way that Black women are uniquely seen as terrorized or terrorizable, and that this is the uniqueness of, and this is one of the framing across the debate, that the potential revealing that happens through their structural analysis in that unique sort of intersection of prostitution is more specific and more compelling than the kind of genericness of the capital accumulation and this is why I read the Chin evidence too, because I thought I'm like, oh, so finally we're actually going to get to like the specificity of like the feminine experience, right? Because this is where it talks about like marriage as a form of chattel slavery, and I find that is more compelling, but it's not unique to like the experience of Blackness.
Yes.
And that's where I think the James and the Wilderson evidence together put them a little bit ahead in the debate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. It just seems that like you're voting on that their evidence is better, but we're the only ones doing explanation of things.
But if your explanation doesn't do the specificity of the warrant work either, like I don't like even if you win the Alexander evidence, but it doesn't answer the James evidence, and that's literally something they're saying across the debate, and I have to go read both pieces of evidence anyway. I get why you might be upset about that,
Yeah.
but I don't know how else to evaluate
Yeah, no, that's fair.
then, you know what I mean? And it's, I guess I will also say that, like, I don't vote on this, like, silencing this ad from the app or the political paralysis. Like, they try to extend a bunch of offense at the end of the debate, and I don't find those to be unique reasons to reject the alternative, right? So I feel comfortable saying I'll evaluate your evidence contextually with one another.
Yeah.
Especially because the top of every app speech is this basically synopsis of the James evidence, and reading it just gets me into the specificity of it. And I guess I don't feel like I have a more warranted explanation of the Alexander
that's fine.
evidence anyway.
My last question is, what kind of explanation do you think that we could do to explain how we solve the hypersexualization?
I think that I don't know, because I was thinking about this too. Like, if they're going to go for our specific instance of structural analysis reveals this instance of like sexual commodification or sexual violence, like you have to win that any starting point excludes other starting points. And I think something that would be compelling to me was offering something specific that gets excluded. Right, so the primary impact you extend is Dyer-Woodford, and this like leads to environmental catastrophe and extinction. I don't know why that is a unique reason to not vote for the specificity of the app. Like, what's another kind of specific instance or specific thing that gets excluded? And then your arguments about, and I guess this is the kind of coalition stuff becomes more persuasive to me. Like,
Yeah.
what are the movements
Yeah.
that they
So do you
kind of
think,
exclude?
and this isn't like, I didn't explain this a lot, so I understand why you mean that, but in the context of like the prison industrial complex, like
Oh,
how
yeah.
capitalism is able to resolve that,
I think that is that's like on the case
and
today,
how they
right?
can't resolve that.
Yeah, like I don't vote for them because they do resolve it, but
Yeah.
I think that this is I think the first thing I said in the RFD, which is that I wish there were 2 more speeches.
Yeah.
I think that if that argument had come out in the block and been more like well developed, then I think that becomes more leverage for you and perhaps is a specific instance. They would still probably make the permutation solves arguments, but
Yeah.
that would allow you, I think, to get a little bit more traction.
Yeah, sorry, I have one more question.
Sure,
That's
fine.
And then how did you evaluate your, like, I know, this isn't, like, I know this is not a reason why you wouldn't vote. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm just next question.
Go ahead.
How do you evaluate the, like, they don't get a permutation argument? Because I feel like that's never answered. So I was just wondering how you evaluate.
Because it's an instance of whiteness?
No, it's an instance of, like, competing methods.
Oh, I don't feel like, I don't really feel like that's the well warranted in the debate.
Okay.
In the same way that I don't think that they just get they don't just get it, right? They have to
Yeah.
get that it's ultimately a good
Yeah, I guess
idea
my
as
thing
a
is I feel like
methodology.
we're the only ones explaining why they don't get it.
They're
They're
not-
explaining why they do get it.
One of the suggestions that I have for y'all in this debate at moments is instead of like perm do both, maybe just like perm do the app.
Okay, yeah.
Right, like the framing that the app is already doing it, to me, it is less of a why, they're not going for we combine strategies and that offers some sort of like unique version of the world. They're going for the James evidence that comes out of the 1AC, which is that they are that structural historical analysis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that you would, maybe this argument we were just talking about like a specific starting point or group or I don't know, specific impact, if it's excluded when we use that as a starting point, then I think you have more offense to leverage against their like sexualization arguments. But as it is, I think for me, it kind of falls in the same category. Like if I look at my notes about the perm, if you have more specific, more arguments, they're just like more generic and don't really kind of integrate with what the affirmative is saying. And so I kind of feel that way about that. You don't get to perm because it's competing methodologies. Like if you're not going to extend the argument and going all in on that as an instance of the permutation as an instance of whiteness, which becomes like a weird floating thing in the debate that I don't really, because you don't go for the pick, and then I'm kind of glad that you don't maybe evaluate that at the end of the debate either. Like I'm glad that that doesn't happen, but unless you're going to leverage some offense like that against their perm is a new problem in some way, shape, or form, then to me it's just an assertion. It's not a reason to reject the permutation. At best, it's like a reason to be suspicious of the permutation. But in this debate, I'm also being encouraged and compelled by being suspicious of your potentially raceless, sexless revolution.
Okay.
Right?
I just have a hypothetical question.
Sure.
So if we would have, probably starting in the 1NR, if framed the debate more around the sort of Tamino history question instead of the movements question, would that have helped us get out of something like the Walker
A
and stuff
little
like
bit.
that?
I think that you need to have, it would be helpful to have a unique link to the sexualization argument and maybe contextualizing, it's not in the evidence, but in the Chen evidence, but reframing that as what they're talking about, then that to me might be more compelling. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Jordan?
No, it makes sense.
And a specific impact about blackness getting commodified. Because I don't know how to evaluate that claim in the context of their Walker evidence. Like if black, and also the app has been pretty consistent about all of this shit has always already been going on.
Yeah.
Right? And so the uniqueness of you're not non-leaking some of your arguments. Like what is the unique engagement in this particular debate, or the unique engagement of the affirmative that either re-entrenches Campbell or makes it more insidious or whatever. You make arguments in the block about glossing over class, but I don't feel like they make it to the 2NR, and certainly not in a way that outweighs the way that they're getting to frame the alternative.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask some questions? on that?
Sure.
So you said that you didn't want the pick to be in the 2AR. Is that because you
Well,
didn't want to evaluate it?
I just
or-
didn't want to have to evaluate it. I mean, I would, and
Yeah.
it's like an interesting argument in the debate. Where is that?
It was on 2 different pages. They answered on the case page, and I put it on that.
I'm compelled by this is your conditionality is a form of disembodied politics and entrenches whiteness. Like I think that can be compelling. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Emma would have went for that. Do you think she did the right thing in this debate?
I think you did the right thing because I don't think that you explained the impact enough in the 1AR.
Okay.
Like it's literally the last breath of the 1AR where you say this is the violent logic of disposability. I think that this is something that you think is going to be a primary strategy. It has to come out earlier, and you need to have more warrants on the impact level, because I think that Misty gets to get up and be like, there is no impact here. There's no risk that it makes anything uniquely worse. I think that it could, and I buy the vital logic of disposability. I think we can link to it, but I don't know if there's enough. It would be hard. The reason I don't want you to do it in this debate is I think it would be really hard for me to justify an affirmative ballot solely on that argument based on the 1AR articulations, especially when I'm holding the negative to a pretty high standard on the lake level of the debate in the
Okay.
Just because of that, do you think that the argument that they are also disembodied, but that they can leave this room and not experience the violence of whiteness was compelling?
No, I'm like less compelled by that. I mean, I'm intrigued by the idea of like who gets to, like, it's not really the way that you're spinning the Alcott argument, but like who gets to represent it. But I feel like I agree with Emma's kind of articulation that it's probably one of the most responsible things for white people to do. And I think the
Yeah.
of having this
The
conversation.
argument I was trying on conditionality that they are also like whiteness too, not speaking for others, but that they can like disembody to like talk about this, but then
You would
we
have
do
to
not
win-
have to talk about
I
it.
think then we would
Or
have like
experience
a,
it.
we would have like a brink discussion, or
Okay.
a Ryland discussion, of like, you would have to win that they engaged in more whiteness than you, and that to me seems like a bad debate choice, right?
Yeah, it was just supposed to be like defense, not offense.
Yeah, I think as defense, it's fine, what you're
Okay.
doing is
Yeah.
fine, I don't, okay, I thought you were asking me.
No.
No reason to.
Not a reason to go, just a reason.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
thank
makes
you.
sense. You're welcome, and good luck.
In the 1AR, I know we kind of like ran, we got to have like not that much time.
Yeah.
Where do you think we could have reallocated time in the 1AR so that doesn't happen?
I think your. I think that maybe on framework, like,
time?
yeah, like I just don't, even after the block, like I'm just like, I don't think they're gonna go for this. I really
Okay,
think that
yeah.
this is about Marxism, and I think trying to be able to see that a little bit, you know, you can never know for sure, and maybe if you spend less time there, they would have gone for it, but I think it puts them in a stickier position if you even out the time allocation a little bit, and you can make, you know, some of these arguments, just like a little more truncated, and I think it would be fine.
Do you think it would have been strategic, like at the top of framework, to just make it more of a clear argument, like we're gonna concede like your reform, they run like reform links on the permutation. If we put that at the top of framework, it'd be like, we will concede these reform links, they say we need a radical restructuring of the way that institutions operate, which means framework can't get access to anything.
Yes,
And then done just like our regulations were given, like there's no TBA and moved on, that would have been enough.
yes.
Okay.
And then I think that's like another interesting way of framing the whiteness, disposability of arguments question, because then, does that make sense? Because you're like, I'm gonna trick you out the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thanks, I appreciate the help.
Sure. And mostly here to listen. I think your app is interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.